many of you had a hero when you were growing up? Raise a hand over if you had a hero when you were growing up. Okay. Not a lot of you, really. When I was growing up as a younger guy, my hero was Green Lantern. Strong and muscular, and he had that magic ring, and with that magic ring, Green Lantern could do just about anything. But eventually, as I got a little bit older, my interest in Green Lantern waned. So I found a new hero. He wasn't one of those superheroes. He was an ordinary human being, but yet still he was my hero. He was a Green Bay Packer. He wore number 31. Jim Taylor was his name. He was a fullback for the Packers, and he was a scrapper. I mean, he'd rather run over the opponent rather than run around him, and many times he did just that. Jim Taylor made All-Pro a number of years. But then, as he got towards the end of his career, Packers, much to my dismay, traded him to the Falcons. And he stayed with the Falcons 1 year and then retired. So I needed to find a new hero. As luck would have it, that fall, a new television series came out. And it was on that television series that I found my last hero. Captain James T. Kirk. Starship Enterprise. Like James Taylor, Kirk was also a scrapper. Heroes. Actually, psychologists say it's important for us to have a hero. Someone that we look up to and emulate, someone that we learn from. But interestingly enough, psychologists say that our society would be much healthier if our heroes were not, please hear that, were not sports figures or television stars or even military personnel. Psychologists say that our society would be healthier if our heroes came from our families. If our heroes were our dads, or moms, or grandpa, or grandma. That's an interesting thought, isn't it? Our society would be healthier if our heroes came from our own families. Are there people in your family that would see you as being a hero? Every now and then at a funeral, a family member will get up and talk about a dad, a mom, or a grandmother, or a grandfather. And as they talk about them, they refer to them as being their hero. And as you listen to why they feel that grandpa or dad or mom is their hero, you begin to see qualities that come through. And many of those qualities are godly kinds of qualities. In a sense, you get the reason or the opinion that that person is seen to be a hero because they have given godly leadership to the individual who's speaking or to the family. Godly leadership. That's what I want to reflect with you on now for the next few moments. Just what does that look like in today's world? Ironically, godly leadership was lacking in Micah's world. Mike read for you from the prophet Micah. And Micah came right out and said, if you were listening to the words that Mike was reading, Micah came right out and said, you can't find a godly person anymore in life. Neighbors lie in wait to get revenge upon their neighbors, said Micah. People are not skilled in doing anything, said Micah, except evil. And Micah goes on, and he talks about how the families just kind of crumbled in his world. Sons dishonor their fathers, said Micah. Daughters rise up against their mothers. Daughter-in-laws against their mother-in-laws. It was a troubled time that Micah lived in. It was a time that lacked real godly leadership. And some, in today's world, would say, we live in that same time period. In fact, Mike noted that to me is before the worship service. Mike said, the scripture for today sounds an awful lot like today's world. And in many regards, he's correct. Many would say that the reason why our society is so troubled is that we lack over and over godly leadership in our families. By fathers and mothers. Maybe by grandparents. Godly leadership. Many think it's lacking. But what does that look like? What does godly leadership look like? Well, in the words that I just got done reading to you from Ephesians, Paul tries to lift up what godly leadership might look like. And if you recall the scripture that I just read, he talks a while about impurity. And he says, godly leadership is concerned about impurity and making sure that it doesn't affect themselves or their family. And so really, a quality here that Paul was describing in godly leadership is those who are gatekeepers for impurity. A godly father or a godly mother is one who's a gatekeeper to keep impurity from coming into the family. And what would that look like in today's world? Well, I think one way that looks like is when parents or grandparents forbid videos and video games with violence and profanity and sex. I think when parents and grandparents forbid that in the house, make sure that the kids aren't into that. They keep impurity out. Certainly there are all kinds of questionable sites on the internet, and that can be reached with the home computer or the cell phone. Again, when that is restricted, monitored closely by parents and grandparents, we ward off impurity. And certainly parents and grandparents need to also model that same kind of behavior. Parents and grandparents, shouldn't say you can't go to those kind of sites, but they go to those kind of sites. Parents and grandparents shouldn't be saying, well, you can't watch violent videos, but they watch violent videos. Consistency is needed for godly leadership. And Paul talks about greed. Some would say that today's society is extremely greedy, extremely materialistic. Well, godly leadership would then look at how can we prevent greed and materialism from coming into my household? How can I keep greed and materialism out of my life as a father, as a mother, as a grandfather? And certainly one way to do that is to make sure that you serve, and you give, and you share as a parent or grandparent. And you not only do it, but you teach it. Help the kids and the youth learn that way. Certainly being mindful and prudent of purchases, toys, luxury, all those kinds of things. Be prudent as a parent or grandparent. And chances are your kids will pick that up as well. So godly leadership is aware of greed and does what it can to counter that in the life of their family. He goes on and he talks about deceit. Again, the way to counter deceit is by being honest, and so Paul talks about how it's important for everyone in the family to speak honestly with each other, to be truthful in their thoughts and their feelings. And this is another way that godly leadership can help teach and demonstrate that important value in life. And he talks about anger. And I hope you notice, Paul does not say you shouldn't get angry. In fact, Paul says, be angry. In other words, Paul is saying it's okay to get angry. You will be angry. But godly leadership is aware that anger can be expressed in very respectful, responsible ways that do not hurt other individuals or take advantage of that. And so be angry, said Paul, but do not sin. In other words, it's okay to be angry, but express your anger in responsible, respectful ways where you're not sinning. And when parents, grandparents demonstrate that and practice that, they present godly leadership to the family. And then Paul talks about work. Paul's aware of the fact that a number of people aren't working. And so Paul tells those in the church, everyone should work. Everyone should try and do what they can to pull their fair share, weight with regards to society and with regards to the family. So godly leadership, I think, again, teaches and demonstrates that everyone will help out in the family. Everyone will have age-appropriate responsibilities. When I talk around with some of our younger families in our community, not necessarily here in our church, I'm just saddened to see how many young families do not expect their young people in the families to work around the house, to share responsibilities around the house. Many moms and dads do not expect kids to help out with dishes or vacuum or dust or mow the lawn or pick weeds or clean the kitty litter box out or pick up dog poop in the backyard. Many families just, they don't expect the kids or the youth to do any of that. And I don't think that's presenting godly leadership. Because kids need to know how to work. They need to learn that from us as parents and grandparents. In fact, many CEOs are extremely concerned about our future workforce in the United States. Because many of our CEOs say, these younger people coming up, they don't know how to work. They don't know how to stay on task. And they're concerned about that. Young people need to learn how to work. They need to learn how to stay on task, and that comes from godly leadership in the family. Paul goes on and he talks about forgiveness, and love, and compassion, and speaking with appropriate words. And again, he implies that godly leadership needs to model this, needs to practice this, needs to teach it, so that these values, love and compassion, can be taught by those who are younger in the family. Godly leadership. What does that look like? Well, Paul gives us some examples. But I think there are some other things that Paul could have mentioned in his list. I think Paul could have put in that list there. Godly leadership also teaches and practices worship.